Hello everyone and welcome to Universal Age of Empires. I'm Pincer, and in today's video we're going to take a look at how Siege works currently. Here we have an image, I believe, with all the Siege units that we have available at present. This video will replace the previous one I made in my tutorial playlist on learning to play Age of Empires 4 at an intermediate or even advanced level. The list I have of tutorials on how to learn to play Age of Empires 4 at an intermediate or even advanced level. I strongly recommend that you take a look at that entire playlist of videos, and without further ado, let's move forward. Well, about rams, you already know that we have two types of rams, the normal ram and the Byzantine ram. The thing is, in this mode, we can't test how they work because it's not possible to do so. Let's start explaining the siege units that we can find in the Castle Age, which include the Mangonel, although there is a special version of the Mangonel that the Ayyubids have, the Mangonel, the Calverin, and the Trebuchet. Let's start with the Mangonels, which are, as you know, specialized units for taking down long-range units, right? And it's also very important that they need protection. In general, any siege unit, if the enemy with melee troops, whether it's melee infantry or melee cavalry, they manage to reach one of these units, they quickly destroy it. The only exception is the Ribadokin, which does have a bit more melee defense. But the rest are very fragile in melee, so we will always want to protect them. Let's design a wall scenario where the Mangonel can be effective. Let's suppose the enemy has a decent group of archers. In fact, let's add more. Our response could be clearly to bring out cavalry. Against archers or crossbowmen, we can deploy cavalry, but usually they will not only have archers, they will also have some spearmen, which complicates the battle for us. The possibility is to bring out cavalry, to which I have just added some spearmen. This is a perfect scenario for our catapult. I have placed several men-at-arms to protect it, and we can also add some spearmen. I'm going to make them fight. There we see both groups approaching the center of the map. Generally, with sieges, it's always advisable to micromanage and stay attentive, to cover them at all times and so on. Do not leave it alone, because an enemy cavalry unit might come in and cause us a lot of trouble, but look at the amount of damage the catapult does at that distance. Let's try to pull back. Another precise shot. Great. A few of these shots and we cause a ton of damage to the opponent, especially if they're crossbowmen, and even more so if they're hand cannoneers, because they're much more expensive units. See, we might lose this battle, but hey, it was worth it. An overwhelming amount of resources compared to what we had, but still we might actually win. Look, another solid catapult hit, and we're on track to win this battle. So basically, this is the perfect scenario to deploy the catapults when the enemy has a bunch of ranged units. But remember, it is always mandatory to have the catapults protected. In this example, I took a big risk because the catapult was left alone, and any unit can come into melee. Even some runaway spearmen can attack us, which is not ideal. Let me show you what would be ideal. Basically, you hit V to hold position, and the catapult will handle firing at the enemy while you keep it protected. So, okay, it's true that maybe you could send some units to the front line, but if you keep it protected with melee units and ranged units blocking access, that's ideal. By the way, it's very important. Catapults used to have a kind of intelligence that aimed directly and hit the enemy. Now it's increasingly important to use the G button. The G means you fire at the ground where you think the enemy will move, okay? It's where you think the enemy will move, and if you get it right, you deal a lot of damage. It's another option for handling it. To explain a little about the other catapult, the catapult called the Manhack. And basically, let's see if this is good. This means there's no space. If there's no space for the catapult to come out, then there's probably no space for any unit to enter either. The catapult takes up more space. Well, it has this ability, let's see, the ability to launch with fire, which basically does more area damage but is less effective. And that's useful because if we have a couple of these manhacks, they cover a much larger area and have a better chance of hitting the enemy. but each projectile does less damage. Well, let's erase this and look at the snipers. The snipers, as you know, used to work as anti-siege units, but that has changed. Anti-siege units, but that has changed now. I'm not sure if we can see the stats. Let's take a look. They are much cheaper than before, having 15 base damage and an additional 10 against melee infantry. So, regardless of whether they are spearmen or men-at-arms, if the enemy approaches with a sizable group of such units, for instance, the Holy Roman Empire might come with a group of men-at-arms. Let's simulate that. I'll take a look. Wait a second. A bunch of Ribadoquins might be the solution, but once again, we can't just field Ribadoquins without support. Going in like that without any strategy, they need protection just like any siege unit does. Check this out. I'm going to have them protected by spearmen. You know that spearmen lose against the men-at-arms. But my goal is not for the spearmen to damage the men-at-arms, not at all. My goal is simply for them to maintain a defensive line that blocks the men-at-arms while the culverins, let's add a couple more which will be needed since they're quite cheap, cause the real damage. In this case, I'm going to set up a line formation, and the good thing about the Espingadis is that the arrow pierces through and continues damaging the units behind the Espingard. If the blob were even bigger, the damage would be more noticeable, but anyway, you can see that the spearmen are handling it quite well, fulfilling their role. And here's the problem, I don't know how this is going to end. Maybe we will win, maybe we won't, but well, that is the idea of the Springardas when the enemy has a big mass of melee infantry. Springles, I am not sure if they are still useful against ships. Yes, plus 65 against naval units, also in maps where, not maps with open water like seas, but on maps with rivers, the Springles can also be very useful for fighting enemy ships. Anything else to add? No, I would say not. Well, what other tier 3 unit do we have left? The trebuchet. Well, as you know, there are two trebuchets. The normal trebuchet, let's see if we can set it up. And then there's the Mongol trebuchet, which is cheaper, but it deals less damage. Well, they are exceptional units. Sorry, I had to leave for a moment. Well, the Mongol trebuchet deals less damage, while the normal trebuchet deals more damage but is a little more expensive. Today, they are excellent units for taking down an enemy castle. Again, previously, there was the issue that while you were attacking the enemy's castle, Springolds could appear from under the castle and easily destroy your trebuchet. Nowadays, if you have a trebuchet well protected by units, it's very difficult for the enemy to hit it, so it will take on much more prominence. Let's reset this and move on to the Imperial Age, okay? At the Imperial Age, we have two quintessential anti-siege units. Well, actually, there are three, okay? But anyway, the regular bombard, this is the French cannon and the culverin. The difference between the bombard and the French cannon is that the French cannon does not need to be set up and dismantled, the bombard does. Although it does not take long, it does not take long at all. They can participate a bit in the fight because they have a base attack of 55 damage. More 55 against infantry. This cannon, the bombards, I do not know if it has more 50 against infantry. Also super special, super good against ships, but really the main role is against buildings and against the opponent's rising units. Basically, it is against everything, but especially it is very useful against buildings that we cannot verify right now because we do not have any buildings to destroy right now. But let's compare. For example, if the enemy brings out catapults, you'll see that these bombers and cannons are very useful against catapults, against springolds. We're going to add springolds and we're even going to add some enemy cannons. In the end, it's like fighting fire with fire, so it happens. A bit similar, by the way, catapults also deal a certain amount of damage to each other. I hadn't mentioned that before, but take note, the cannons are super effective in taking down enemy catapults, and we'll also see that they are effective against springolds. Now, I forgot to mention catapult versus catapult and springold versus versus Springald. They are interesting. We will see them now and continue explaining the cannons. Well, you see, cannons against cannons are quite effective. Cannons against Springalds are also very effective. Okay, let's do that catapult against catapult, which I find very interesting. Basically, I think with 5 catapult shots you can destroy one. For example, if we attack here, it will be left with either 20% or 25% of its life, or maybe not. Maybe it takes 5. Let's see, I'll fire a 4th shot. Yeah, it takes 5. I had the figures wrong, so a catapult... if the enemy brings out a catapult and you have a catapult, you can mutually neutralize each other's catapults. Well, the difference is that the Colferin can shoot farther but does less damage. Which one is better depends on the circumstances and the map. Let's face off a cannon with a Colferin out of curiosity to see who wins in the face-off between these two, but really it depends a lot, right? In theory, maybe the Colferin having a bit more range is valued more because it can hit the first shot, and if the cannon tries to flee, perhaps the Colferin can continue hitting the cannon. I have no idea. The first shot hits, and maybe if the cannon tries to flee, the Colferin can keep reaching the cannon. I have no idea. The price is similar in both cases. Let's see. The Colferin manages to shoot first, but we see that the cannon does more damage. I do not know who will win, as in any case it is quite close. As I already mentioned, some civilizations will have cannons, others will have Colferins. It is very, very close. You just need to know how to adapt. Now we can see that the cannon won, but by just a very small margin. Then we have the organ gun, which is an exceptional unit. We've said that the cannon is generally good against everything, especially against siege units and ships, make that buildings. Additionally, the cannon and the Colferin can be effective against ships and siege units, and lastly against infantry. Well, the Bombardashi, I haven't explained it yet, but it's like a powerful cannon. Beashias are going to see you, they are going to bring out the bombard, some spearmen to defend it and place a strong enemy mass. Notice that it does 70 base damage and an additional 150 against infantry. The Bombard, without a doubt, I think is the best unit in the game. You'll see the damage it will do, especially since it deals area damage. The cannon targets a single unit while the Bombard deals area damage. Great against infantry, although here I might have needed a bit more defense. Our dear Bombard might be taken down. So, did you see the area damage it did there? It looks like it's going to be destroyed. I should have given it a bit more care, a bit more protection, but as you can see, it's brutal, right? And the last unit I have left to explain is the Ribadokin. The Ribadokin has, I made too many, will make 2 or 3. It has something quite special. It's both a ranged and melee unit. It has quite a bit of resistance. Let's see if we can check it out. It has 10 melee armor, but at a distance, it is the siege unit with the least damage reduction from ranged attacks, only reducing by 35%. What does this mean? Well, in addition, the Ribadokin deals a lot of damage, 42 damage, although I'm not sure what 42 damage means exactly, but then it says 12 burst attack. I don't really know the precise damage, but it's a ton, and you'll see for yourselves now. So the Ribadokin is the only unit that if we want to face it, it's better to deploy ranged units than melee units. It's quite striking, and with this we're going to wrap up the video. I hope the explanation has helped you understand how all these units currently function. Let's hold position. All these units, notice how strong the Ribadokins are, but of course if we leave the Ribadokins unprotected, well, there won't be enough time to show it, but I assure you that the enemy archers can deal massive damage to them. The Ribadokins are a unit that used to be seen very little, but in the current meta, now that we no longer have the Espingardas as anti-siege units, it's becoming more common. Well guys, I hope you found this video interesting. See you in the next one. See you soon.